word wealthy actually means well and healthy. It comes from two words, well and healthy. So to be wealthy means to be well and healthy.
Today's guest is known as the Wealth Witch. Leah Steele is a holistic wealth strategist, paradigm shifter, author, and host of the podcast, The Wealth Witch Podcast. She supports spiritual entrepreneurs to do the necessary healing and implement the necessary strategies to be financially well-resourced. And her work has been seen on Forbes, Los Angeles Times, and Influensive, just to name a few. Within this conversation, we dive into all things financial sovereignty. We get into understanding the concept of holistic wealth and understanding why the current financial systems and structures are systems of oppression and do not serve us individually nor collectively, as well as how we can begin to take our power back through achieving financial sovereignty. We speak about old paradigm beliefs that spiritual people tend to have about money and why are those not necessarily true and most definitely not supportive, and speak on how to increase our service and impact through empowering ourselves financially and steps that everybody can take in order to create a holistically or more holistically wealthy reality for themselves. I hope that this conversation is of value to you, that you enjoy it as much as we did. It is definitely filled with so many golden nuggets, and I'm excited to share it with you. So keep on listening as we dive right into it. Leah, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I want to start with exactly what it is that you do. You call yourself a holistic wealth strategist, and I would love to start there because I know that we hear a lot about wealth strategy and how to build our wealth strategy, but I don't think that we necessarily hear a lot about holistic wealth. So could you share with us what that means to you and how do you support people to create holistic wealth strategies for their lives and businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, wealth, I don't believe we can ever be truly wealthy unless we're wealthy in all areas of our lives. And the word wealthy actually means well and healthy. It comes from two words, well and healthy. So to be wealthy means to be well and healthy. I think a lot of people really focus on what it means to be wealthy financially. But when we don't have wealth in all the other areas of our lives, in our relationships, in our health, it really is impossible to create sustainable financial wealth. And so for me, very early on, what I realized was that I didn't want to just take one aspect to helping people, become financially resourced, but that I wanted to look at this human experience as from a very holistic lens and take into account all the things that we need to bring into balance to create sustainable wealth in our life.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, and I agree. And as I mentioned before we press record, I listened to one of your podcast episodes and in this new season of your show, where you were talking so passionately and truthfully about the current financial system that we live in and how we cannot truly be wealthy until we, and I'm totally changing how you talked about this. I'm saying it my way, but how we can't be truly holistically wealthy until we find our financial sovereignty, and so many different aspects of the current financial system that we live in or by that are not in alignment or is not in alignment with our sovereignty. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that and take us as deep as you want into that so that we can really get a sense for what it is that isn't working and how do we gain holistic wealth through empowering ourselves and reclaiming our sovereignty in a financial sense as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a topic, obviously, that I'm really passionate about. I'm sure if you heard the podcast episode, I was probably ranting and raving about this. So for me, I think really the place where we've gotten very lost is that we have subjugated ourselves to our financial institutions and organizations and governments and regulatory bodies and agencies. And so we've literally given away our agency. We've given away our free agency. We've given away our sovereignty. And, this isn't to place blame upon us, because this has been happening for generations and generations and generations. We have been programmed and conditioned to be compliant commodities. And this is really regardless of wherever you live in the world. I was born and raised in America. So, I have a very strong opinion about how the United States creates compliant commodities out of its citizens. But there is a version of that in every country, every town, planet Earth. And what has happened is that there are very few that are ruling the masses. And I don't mean that from a government perspective. I do mean that from a global financial agenda. So regardless of where you're living in the world, there are an elite group of people that are controlling the resources of this planet, whether it's, our financial resources or our food resources, our medicines, our health, our ability to access health and medicines, our technology. I mean, it goes on and on. And they have an agenda and they have an interest at heart, but it is not the highest and best interest of the masses and of humanity. So essentially what's happened is we've literally been programmed and conditioned from the time we take our first breath on this planet to operate as a compliant commodity inside this global financial agenda. The world economy, the global economy is built on and has for, I think as long as humanity at some level has been on this planet, been built on the backs of bodies. And so, while we often don't want to think about slave labor and how the sex trade is playing a role in the global economic reality, it is how it's funded. And so, every time we go and buy that latte, or every time we pick up our iPhone, like we have to begin to have a realization that the conveniences of our modern day life are built on slave labor. And that in and of itself keeps us trapped in a system that isn't serving our highest and best good. So there's a big part of this is we have to actually wake up, stop ignoring the things that make us uncomfortable, stop turning away and pretending the things that our realities don't exist. Have an awareness of that. And does that mean that you don't use your iPhone anymore? No, but it means that if you're doing it, you're consciously doing it. And then perhaps through that, being conscious of that, you start looking for other options or other vehicles through which you can do the things that you're doing that aren't so detrimental to like the overall reality of humanity's existence on this planet right now. So for me, I feel like it's very important that we go back to the place where we realize that we are not slaves and we came to this planet with divine free will, which means that we are not subject to the laws of governments and financial institutions and organizations. And I really truly believe that until we take back our sovereignty in those areas, and until we stop, subjugating ourselves and giving our power away and just simply going along with the status quo, until we really start standing up for the highest and best good of the collective versus continuing to just fulfill an agenda that serves a few, we'll continue to perpetuate this. But I do believe that we're being given an opportunity right now to change this dynamic.
Yes.
That was a bit all over the place. Hopefully that.
No, I love that. I love that. And we get to hear it because it's true. And there's so many ways in which we are not truly paying attention to that, but we are behaving and living as if that wasn't a reality. The way in which we choose to consume, not just the iPhones, but the everyday, the clothes that we buy, I can say I don't, but generally speaking, and I did years ago, like the clothes that we buy, where do they come from? Who made them? At what cost? What is it costing the people that are making it? What is it costing the earth that is being, the materials are getting, taken from. Like, there is a cost to everything, and understanding the real cost is so important. And understanding, I love that you say we get to understand that we are not slaves. And in a way, I feel like we get to first recognize the ways in which we are behaving as such, so that we can then take our power back. We are not slaves, but there's so many ways in which we are giving our sovereignty completely away and behaving as if we were, as if we had no choice, as if we had no other option. And we do this with the educational system, with the health system, with the choices that we make on a daily basis through consumption and materialism, all of the different ways. So I would love to hear from you. What do you think are the first steps that we start taking to reclaim our sovereignty, to start empowering ourselves financially, and of course in all of the other ways that you mentioned?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first thing that we have to do is really like rip that veil away, because there's so many things that we're not aware of. And for me, the easiest way to do that is to literally begin questioning everything. So everything that you've always believed to be true, just begin questioning everything. And in each of those scenarios, asking ourselves, if this was a lie, this thing that I've been told to be true my whole entire life, if this was a lie, who would benefit from that lie? And if there's a financial benefit to you believing that thing, to a government, financial institution or organization, a regulatory body or agency, a pharmaceutical company, a technology company, if there's a financial tie to one of those types of institutions or organizations, it's time to really begin deconstructing that and looking at that. And this can be really difficult because often these things are foundational, morals and values that have been passed down to us from our parents and from our grandparents and from our great-grandparents. And we've assigned and associated, right or wrong or good or bad with how well we comply with these things. And so there can be a real internal moral struggle when we start to question these things, because even the questioning of them is looked at often as doing something wrong. Yeah. So, I think that's the place that we have to start. We have to really begin looking at who is benefiting from how we're living our lives. And if it's not us and our immediate family, then we need to start looking at options and different ways of doing things. And so that to me really is the first step. That's how we begin to step back into our sovereignty, because sovereignty really is, it's reigning over our own domain. And in doing that, we can't be subjugating ourselves to anything else. We just can't. It doesn't work. And so, and this is difficult, especially for spiritual people, to say, no, I'm going to put myself first, because that goes against all of the programming and conditioning of the spiritual community as well. But I really, truly believe that until we start putting ourselves first, until we start, really taking our power back and stepping into our sovereignty, we can't actually help the collective anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I love that you brought this up with the spiritual community, because I know that one thing that I really love about you and your approach is that I can feel the passion. I can feel that you're totally coming from this space of wanting to serve humanity and shift paradigms. And there is this integrity and service-driven approach to your work. And you are deeply connected in spirituality, your growth, your spiritual journey are important to you. What I see, and I see that this gap it's getting shorter and shorter, smaller and smaller, as more of us step up and breach those worlds of entrepreneurship and spirituality. And we let go of these old paradigm ideas that we can only be wealthy and greedy or spiritual and broke. And in saying that, there are still a lot of people living in that old paradigm dualistic approach to wealth. And there is this idea that there's a lot of people that are chasing money for the sake of chasing money. And it's just about self-service and ego-driven, seeking validation, seeking security through nothing is enough. And then there are a lot of people that have these heart-driven missions and are married and attached to this being broke story. So what are your thoughts on this? How do we start reclaiming our sovereignty from this conditioning and this programming as well, so that we can lead with integrity, with embodiment from a spiritually connected place and creating wealth.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing there is that, again, it's this realization of this, you have to be broke to be spiritual, again, it was crafted by design. The spiritual community didn't just wake up all of a sudden one day and say, oh, I can't get paid for my purpose work, or, purpose has to equal poverty. That didn't happen. That was very intentionally designed to keep spiritual people disempowered. So, as we were going through there are lots of different times in history that this was reinforced, but, certainly during the Inquisition, and, as we were yelling heresy and disempowering medicine women and spiritual leaders and healers and energy workers, the healers of that time, as we were disempowering them, we took them from, being wholly supported by the community and by the tribe and cared for and resourced so that they could do their work, to, first of all, making them afraid to do their work, making it wrong to do their work. But then this idea, this reinforcement of, if you're truly spiritual and you're truly a healer and you've truly been given this gift, then you have to give it away for free. That was done very intentionally to keep spiritual people disempowered, because when spiritual people are empowered, they change the world. When spiritual people are empowered, they cannot be controlled or manipulated, because they can see through the illusion, they can see through the veils. And this continued with the canonization of the Bible. And so then we start to step into, what does it mean to be spiritual and religious? And if you are truly going to be a spiritual or religious leader, you have to take vows and oaths of poverty. So this has very intentionally been reaffirmed, conditioned, and programmed over the years. And so that's the first. I think spiritual people really just need to understand, like, you've been played. Like, you were never supposed to be living and operating in this reality. And in fact, before these things happened, you weren't. The spiritual leaders of the tribes and the communities were some of the most well-resourced, were some of the most well cared for, were living in some of the nicest homes and wearing the nicest material and clothing, because the community and the tribe supported the gift that they had to give. And there was a value exchange happening, right? And obviously currency looked different in different times throughout history, but we were once properly resourced. And then I think the next thing that we have to really have an awareness of, and in often cases check ourselves on, is that when we are not properly resourced, we cannot make the impact that we came here to make. So, people can continue to stay, married to this martyrdom complex they have. I mean, you probably have heard me say, I'm like, come down off your cross already and make some money, because that martyrdom complex, it's not serving you, and it's not serving the people that you were meant to impact on this planet. And, I think that, and then we have all this programming and conditioning around how money equals greed, which is another way that they have kept us disempowered. Because if they keep us thinking, don't want more, that's greedy, don't want more, that's evil. Money is the root of all evil, very intentionally put into the Bible, right? This is programming. It is conditioning. We see it happen generation after generation after generation. If we stop for a minute and we think about, money is just energy, right? And energy doesn't make you good or bad. If you're a good person and you're a service-driven person, and you desire to do work that's going to change and impact the world, all money is going to do is amplify your ability to do that.
Yeah.
Now, are there people that are, like you said, self-serving and only interested in chasing money and wealth for, personal gain? Absolutely. And as those people become more resourced, they're going to do more of that, because that is who they are. So, that idea of like, all of a sudden, if we become wealthy, or all of a sudden we can become properly resourced, we're going to become a horrible person and all of a sudden be greedy and not doing what we were doing before. It doesn't even actually make sense if we stop and think about it for a moment.
It doesn't. It's like a fairy tale myth. All of a sudden, you're this embodied, in integrity woman, connected. You care so much about the earth. You care about humanity. And now here you get $2 million, and all of a sudden you're an asshole. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. You're the whore of Babylon all of a sudden, right? Like it doesn't work like that. Like and this is the beauty, like, this is why I do what I do, because I love to see spiritual entrepreneurs properly resourced, because I love to see the amplification of their gifts and their impact that they're making in the world. So I love seeing those people that, decide to live a life of service to humanity and break through these paradigms and this conditioning and this programming, and, step into a place where they believe that they're worthy and deserving of being properly resourced for sharing their gifts, and then see them just explode and the enormous expansion of the impact that they're having. And then they get it. And then they're like, oh yeah, and it doesn't have to be about chasing money, but it does have to be about, when I am properly resourced, I can do more good in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I had this realization once after a ceremony that was years ago, and I came out of that ceremony being like, oh my God, we've been scammed. Like, we've been totally scammed. Like, it makes so much sense why certain people would make people that care about the earth and protecting the environment and making sure that ancient wisdom is passed down generation through generation, and making sure that the First Nations and the indigenous people of the earth are taken care of, and making sure that things are being done ethically and in integrity, and all of these different values. It makes sense why they would make those people feel like they have to be ashamed, scared, feel guilty, or feel this sense of absolute rejection towards money. Because if you're worrying about whether you can pay your rent or not, whether you can buy yourself a land where you can do your work or not, whether you can afford taking your kids to the type of school that you would like, or homeschooling your children with a community, whatever it is, if you're worrying about whether you have the choices, the money to live in the way that you decide, you don't have time and energy to be serving. So it makes absolute sense why certain corporations, certain people, call it however you want, whoever you want to say they are. It makes sense why they would lead us to believe, us meaning light workers, people that are here to do spiritual work, to do good work, that money is evil. It makes sense why. And this is not just for spiritual people. There's so many people that maybe don't identify with the concept of being spiritual, but they have the same beliefs around money. But again, it goes to say, coming back to what you were sharing about the financial system that we have been living in or tied to, that it makes sense. There is a reason and a very clear track that we can trace of why we would be led to believe that money is evil, so that we are disempowered, so that we are worrying about the little things that we shouldn't be worried, that if we weren't worrying about, we could do such an impact in the world. We could put all of that energy, all of that time, all of that thought, all of that mental and energetic capacity into recreating a world that is in alignment with the things that we want to see more of. So on that note, I would like to hear as well a little bit more about how you support your clients to expand their capacity to hold wealth. Because another thing I see is that a lot of people that have those beliefs, spiritual, not spiritual, it usually comes down to this having a really good heart and wanting to be a really good person, and then thinking that if we have money, we're not going to be a good person. But those people tend to, even when they manage to make money, give it away, lose it away, spend it away, find themselves broke over and over again. I've seen it in myself. That was my story years ago. I've seen it in so many of my clients. No matter how much more money your business is making, finding yourself back into the same place where you're broke or not as well-resourced as you would like. How can people start expanding their capacity to hold wealth?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it comes down to it always comes down to worthiness and deserving, like not feeling that we are worthy and deserving of having that. And I think, you know, probably a very close second is these fears that we were just talking about around, you know, if I do begin to acquire and accumulate wealth, am I going to become a bad person? And so even though we may be making a lot of money in the month, it's like we won't hold on to it, because at some level it's like if we're spending it, or we're, you know, and often what you find is spiritual people overgiving. So they start making money and then they begin overgiving. And then they're still not protecting themselves and creating a strong foundation for sustainability, for sustainable wealth. They're just making money, giving money, making money, giving money. Because they don't want to, you know, one, they either don't feel worthy and deserving of having more than enough, or they're buying into this idea of, you know, if I acquire and accumulate wealth and money, then all of a sudden I'm going to magically turn into a demon or something. So there's, you know, it's that. For me, it's, you know, I do wealth repatterning work. And so I use emotional clearing to deconstruct emotional pathology that's stuck, stored, stagnant, trapped in the organs and meridian systems of the body. And that's actually how I do it. That's how I help people expand into the ability to, you know, acquire, accumulate, hold more, earn more, really just shift their entire relationship to money. So that's how I do that. And I think that, you know, for all of us, me included, it's constantly a journey of self-discovery. And, you know, I think wealth consciousness work is forever work. It never ends. You know, I've been going through an interesting, like, little transition the last few months of like desiring to step into greater levels of savings, so that I can create more stability and security in my life, so that I can make more of a difference out in the world. And so I've been, you know, bumping up against some limiting beliefs and some programs and conditions that I'm holding around that. And so, you know, for me, it's like this work of staying in a constant state of inquiry, questioning everything, being willing to deconstruct any of the stories and limiting beliefs that you come up against over and over and over. Like it's an ongoing thing. I don't think that it's I wish I could say, oh, there's this magic pill, you take this pill, or you do this thing, or you do this exercise, or you know, do this program, and then all of a sudden for the rest of your life, you know, you're going to be okay with money. Unfortunately, the nature of money and finances on this planet is that it's the number one way that we're controlled and manipulated. And as a result of that, you know, until that stops, we're going to have to continue to do work around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we all have so much trauma. We all have money trauma. And so, you know, that will continue to get triggered. And as you up level and as you expand and as you grow into wealth, you keep running up against it. You have to keep clearing it. It gets easier, I think. But
yeah, absolutely. And it is refreshing to hear this as well, because we also live in a day and age where we hear all of these promises as well. Like, download this free PDF with a 4-step process to absolute wealth. And it's like, well, it doesn't work like that. But there are so many ways in which we are led to believe. And again, I see this as another form of imprisoning us further into our stories and our conditioning and our programming and our perceived lack of choice, is that we are led to believe that things are just like this. And if they're not happening like this, super fast, super easy, super quick, then we shouldn't want them. We shouldn't chase them. It's a lost case. And this, like any other type of work, requires time, requires dedication, requires commitment. I remember when hitting 6 figures was this like super goal of like, oh my God, 6 figures. And then you get to 6 figures and 6 figures is no longer exciting. And then people get to 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures. It's never exciting once you're there. And there's also a lot to say with doing the work that also allow us to be happy and content with where we're at instead of constantly chasing the next thing. And there is, as part of our nature as humans, we are constantly seeking to evolve. We are constantly seeking to grow. And what I love about this approach and this work that you're supporting spiritual entrepreneurs to do as well is that it is, yes, about wealth, but it is at the end of the day about liberation. Like I always say, you know, it's not about the thing. It's about the journey that's going to take me to the thing. Because when I get the thing, it means that I freed myself from so many of the prisons in my mind the things that I thought I had to be like, I had to do, I had to accept the things or the ways in which I thought I was capable and not capable, safe and not safe to be, do, or have something. So really the holistic wealth, when we get there, whatever goal is that you have, it's not just about the wealth acquirement, but it's about the level of growth and liberation that we have gained to get to that point, which is why, in my opinion, this is such an exciting journey. On that note, I would love to hear more about what can people start doing on a practical level. What are some ways in which you can start to reclaim your sovereignty in a financial sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the most important thing I think that we need to do right now is recognize and realize that the things that we believed brought us safety, stability, and security were illusions. And we've seen a lot of that over the last couple of years. So for me, what I talk to my clients about is coming to the realization that you are actually your guarantee. And so there's never been a more important time to create your own streams of revenue. So to not depend upon a 9-to-5 job or revenue coming from, a source that you don't have control over. And so, even if you do have an incredible 9-to-5 job that you love, it's, for me, really, really important for all of us to begin to look at, how do I open up additional streams of revenue that I have control over? How do I show up as my guarantee? So that I know that, the money that's coming to me is coming as a direct result of something that I'm creating and I am generating. So whether that's a home-based business, whether that's affiliate marketing in some ways, which I believe is going to have an enormous resurgence, even more than it already has over the next couple of years. But, or is it just, opening, if you've already have a business that you're doing, that's your business, it's beginning to look at, how do I open up other taps? How do I open up other streams of revenue within the work that I'm already doing? Yeah, there was a statistic about bankruptcies in the United States in 2019 that just completely blew my mind. And it was, so in 2019, the United States had more bankruptcies than it's had in years and years and years. 75% of those bankruptcies could have been avoided if the family was bringing in $800 more a month.
Wow.
And that just hit me and struck me so deeply because, once you step into wealth consciousness work and wealth expansion, you realize that it's actually not that difficult to make an additional $800 a month. But to look at how so many people were in such a state of financial internment that they couldn't comprehend a way to make $800 more a month, shows me that we have a lot of work to do there. And so this is part of the reason why I think it's so important to just begin to open up additional streams of revenue, even if it's $200 a month here, $500 a month here. It's like you begin to get really wise about where you're spending your time and how you can maximize bringing money in that will support and bolster your current reality. So that's one of the things that I think is really important. And I think it's important also that we begin to diversify how we look at currency, money, and how we operate within our existing financial systems and structures. And so to me, that looks like, I really truly believe that people should be holding money in multiple currencies, not just in the currency of your home country that you live in. I think that we really need to begin to, especially if you're an American, really need to begin to look at, what is the reality of the US dollar, which obviously once that collapses, and it will, there's no question it's going to at some point, that's going to actually affect the world. But yeah, if you are dealing in US dollars in your businesses, really beginning to look at like, what is the stability of that? And, instead of keeping your money in a bank in, a home currency or in the US dollar, it's like, maybe begin to look at diversifying that and investing in some precious metals and, holding some financial resources outside of financial institutions and organizations. Because I really believe that, between now and 2027, we're going to see the complete collapse of the financial institutions, systems, and structures as we know it. Like, it's not going to continue on like this. We're beginning to see it happening already. And so I just think that it's really important that people, and it's not necessarily that you have to act on this right now, but begin thinking about this. Begin thinking about it. Begin thinking about how you can diversify the money and the wealth that you hold, how you can begin to open up additional streams of revenue. And if you have no clue about how to do that, then perhaps it's just meditating on, journaling on, being willing to open yourself up to receiving an idea about what perhaps you could do in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to the people that are feeling entrapped right now? I know that since the pandemic, let's call it like that, a lot of people have been getting in debt and buying a lot of things that they don't need, getting into habits of consumption to deal with a collective trauma that humanity is going through. What would you say to people that are choosing to get themselves in debt, not necessarily from a space of needing to for survival, but as a choice? And where do you see our money gets to go in order to create that financial sovereignty for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we've had a huge activation of fear consciousness on this planet over the last 2 years. And so that, all of that happens from people being afraid and being scared and survival instincts kicking in because they're having freedoms or perceived freedoms. I think we're starting to see that they were actually just perceived freedoms. They weren't actually freedom, but we're having perceived freedoms stripped away from us. And so, and that activates a lot of fear. And especially when our safety, stability, and structure that we believe, has held us starts to look a little rocky. And then we wonder like, oh, is my company going to go out of business? Oh, what if this happens? Like, that activates a lot of fear. And, so what we ended up seeing was fear activated across the planet. We've never seen it like that, I don't think. And obviously that has a lot to do with like technology and social media and, our access at our fingertips to what's happening, and the ability for the media to control and manipulate us as well. It's a double-edged sword there. But for me, what I see is that the majority of people on this planet have had that fight, flight, freeze activated in them at one point or another over the last couple of years. And it's really difficult once we activate that to calm ourselves back down to a place where we're not operating from the midbrain. So I think that meditation and journaling and devotion and discipline when it comes to our spiritual practices and the things that keep us grounded and centered is more important now than it's ever been. And those are the things that I think that we really need to double down on, because I think that we're going to see more of this attempt to control and manipulate using fear, not less. And so we have to really step into our own power and our belief that we are the most powerful creator in our reality, regardless of what's happening in our external environment and on the global stage. We get to have a choice in each moment of every day about whether or not we're going to operate from fear or scarcity or lack, or we're going to operate from a place of faith and trust and belief and love and compassion. And so I think the more that we can lean into those things and recognize and realize that there is global manipulation happening that's activating fear, when we start to feel that coming up, make a choice to not play into that. Make a choice to do the things that that are going to bring you back into alignment with the highest and best good of you as a divine immortal being on this planet.
Yeah, 1000%. I've seen it. I've been working with somatics and nervous system regulation for years. And I've seen it particularly in the last couple of years, just the need for people to get radical about their regulation practices and all of these different ways in which they can support their nervous systems to come into a more regulated state, because the world before the pandemic was already a stressful, fast-paced world. But now there are so many inputs, so many ways in which we are constantly receiving these traumatic or scary kind of moments or impressionable moments that really bring that level of stress to our nervous system. So I totally agree that that is so important to stay grounded so that we can make empowered choices in whatever direction, whatever way we want. On that note, I'd love to hear, why do you think is so urgent that spiritual entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders start working on being well-resourced, financially well-resourced?
Well, I think, we're certainly engaged in some form of war for the soul of humanity right now. And I think that all spiritual people are feeling that at some level. And, in order to battle this and move out of this place and shift the trajectory of humanity to a place where we continue on a path of ascension and expansion and enlightenment, I really believe that we need all of our light workers, all of our spiritual entrepreneurs, all of our people who have realization of their divine mission on this planet to really catch the sense of urgency around showing up and doing their work in the world right now. And that it's very important that they're properly resourced to do that work, because there are people that they need to impact. There are people that need their help and their assistance. And I don't know that there's ever been a time that it's been more needed than it is now. And so, if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh, well, I know I'm meant to be doing this work in the world, but I don't have a website yet, or I don't have the community that I would like to have, or I don't have, a good email list. The thing I would say to you is just, we need you doing your work now. So just begin. It's like, just start taking the steps, just start putting yourself out there, just start being of service to humanity, because humanity needs it so much right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that way, for anybody listening that maybe feel really enrolled in wanting to reclaim their sovereignty in a financial way, and all of the different ways, but really wanting to bring that holistic financial wealth, you know what I'm trying to say. But with that, what's the first step that people can start taking from today? Like, from the moment they put their phone down, have finished listening to this episode, what is one aligned action that anyone, regardless of where they're at in their business, regardless of how far they've come in their career, regardless of whether they're already started doing what they love, or they're still trying to figure out what it is that they want to do and how they are here to serve humanity, what is one thing that every person can start doing or looking at, thinking about, that is going to empower them financially?
Oh, well, so many things. What is one thing? I think just making a daily commitment to think about wealth consciousness. Because especially with spiritual people, it's, they'll do the journaling and they'll do the meditation and they'll do the things, but they won't actually spend that little amount of time. And, for me, it's like when I first started my journey, it was an hour a day, non-negotiable, of listening to podcasts, listening to books, going out there, finding information and educating myself and researching. And, today still I do between 20 and 2 hours, kind of depending upon my day, but 20 minutes at minimum of expansion work around wealth consciousness. And so I think just making a commitment to a daily dedicated and devotional wealth consciousness practice, reading books, listening to podcasts, finding courses and classes that expand your information, knowledge, wisdom, whether it's around investing or alternate currencies or, even just mindset shifts around wealth consciousness work. Like, just making a commitment to doing that on a daily basis is really, like, if everybody on the planet was doing that, I think we would be shifting so much more quickly than we are now.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say is your biggest wish for humanity? Like, if you could right now wave a magic wand and get everyone empowered financially, every single light worker to have the amount of money or the financial resources that they could. What do you wish to see in this world as a result of that?
I mean, I think my biggest wish for humanity is that we begin to trust each other again. And, you know, and that comes from trusting ourselves first. So we're surrendering a lot of our autonomy to our governments and financial institutions, organizations, you know, these regulatory bodies that are telling us what we should or shouldn't be doing with our bodies. And my greatest wish for humanity is that we recognize and realize that we are divine, sovereign beings that have free will, and we start trusting ourselves to make the decisions that are in the highest and best good of us. And then we start trusting each other to do the same. And, you know, I trust my neighbor to make the right decision for them. And we take back our perceptions and our projections and stop trying to force others to get our point of view and live in our reality. And we just trust ourselves to make the decisions for ourselves and trust our neighbors to make the decisions for them. I think as a result of that, we would be in a very different place. And I think that's what's coming. I just think it's, it's taking some serious, shaking up and eye-opening for that to happen. But that is the vision that I see for humanity. I think that is where we're going. So yeah, that's my wish.
Absolutely. I love it. And I'm right there with you. I definitely think that's where we're headed. And on that note, I'd love to know, how can people find you? How can people work with you and start working on this with your support?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have a podcast, the Wealth Witch podcast. That's a great place to come and get to know more about me and the work I'm doing. That's available everywhere podcasts are streamed. I'm at the Leah Steele on all the social medias, so you can come find me on your favorite platform. And if you're interested in knowing more about offers, which span from, free forward-facing content to high-level masterminds and things, you can visit my website at theleahsteele.com.
Awesome. I'm going to leave all of these links in the show notes as well. And last question, last but not least, is, in your opinion, what makes a leader sacred?
I believe that sacred leadership is empowering the people that we're leading to step into their own personal sovereignty and helping and showing them how to come back into full alignment with themselves and to identify what serves their highest and best good. So for me as a leader, I feel it's my number one job. It's not my job to tell people how to get back into alignment, but it's to help show them how to bring themselves back into alignment, how to embrace their own sovereignty. I suppose that I feel that I'm most in my sacred leadership when people graduate from working with me, because they've become empowered and they've become sovereign, and now they're off being sacred leaders of their own.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Leah, for again taking the time, but also for the work that you do, not just the wisdom that you've shared on this podcast, but the level of integrity and embodiment that you really focus on bringing to everything that you do, to your work, to the way in which you serve, and for everything all of the ways in which you are helping humanity. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this video and got lots of value from it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for many more value-packed free videos, and share this with anyone in your life who can also get value from it. If you want to get access to all of my free resources and connect, check out the links in the caption. Thank you again, and I will see you on the next video.